So what I'd like to do is, I think the presentations during this clinic have been outstanding, and I would really like to use this opportunity now to go a little deeper into the theory and show some other videos, some of the ideas I've been working with over the last 2 years. If you have any questions throughout this, or if you think about some of these ideas over the next few days, weeks, months, please feel free to send me a message on social media. I would love to hear about how you're trying some of these things, as well as any problems you may be encountering. So when I presented yesterday, I spoke about constraints. And constraints are informative boundaries which shape learning, but specifically we have 3 different types of constraint, which we're going to be looking at in a few moments. And when we look at the traditional approach to coaching and how I first started, this would obviously be how we start, where we very much focus on the techniques that we are seeing within the game. And we use internalized feedback to complement those things, along with some traditional drills. Whereas the reality is, this is the real environment. And every situation is different. The role of constraints, they're ever present. These constraints are constantly interacting, leading to the skills, aka the movements that emerge. So individual constraints I spoke about. So if you see in this photo, we got Lude Herkansen. So the individual constraints in terms of his height, his wingspan, maybe some of his action capabilities, which Alan is going to speak about in terms of speed, quickness, vertical jump. How do those compare to the defenders in this instance? So maybe, finishing against a really big defender is going to be very different to finishing against a smaller defender. Then we've got the task constraints, and I'm not going to read them, you can see them right there. Environmental constraints I haven't included on here, but these are very important. So these would be things related to, could be things like the surface, the temperature, the culture. It could be greater things in society. So for instance, what are some social, cultural constraints of Swedish society? So the confluence of these constraints shapes the movements that occur. And I mentioned the affordance yesterday, and some of this language, especially when I first started, it can be very intimidating. But if you're able to invest a little bit of time in just trying to really get to grips with it, it can really help, because it changes the way you can see the game. So an affordance is simply an invitation for action. So if you look at this photo here, the affordances for Lude, his affordance landscape, are shaped, of course, by what he is encountering in this environment. So maybe he's perceiving space to get through the defense there in the gap. But every player perceives affordances in a different way. So for instance, picture right now let's say we had Nikola Jokic, Steph Curry, and Giannis Antetokounmpo. And they were in possession of the ball at the top of the key. There was 7 seconds left in the game, and all their teammates were spaced really nicely to allow for a one-on-one. The affordances that those 3 guys would perceive would be very different. Steph Curry might perceive space as an opportunity to get a quick shot off, whereas Giannis might perceive space as an opportunity to drive. Nikola might perceive space as an opportunity to try and deceive the defense, creating a greater advantage looking for a pass. So this is why affordances are relative to every player, and that's why when we look at teaching fundamentals and things like this, because affordances are so unique, that's why I don't believe in a one-size-fits-all approach, because every player perceives the game differently. And that's the reality of what we're looking at within the constraints-led approach. So I spoke about the role of perception-action coupling yesterday. What we're looking at here is closeouts. And a lot of the errors you saw were due to players not being able to perceive certain things in their environment. So this is something I call one-on-one plus 2 bursts. The offense is always offense, and you can see we are getting loads of variability in here and lots of repetition without repetition. We're constantly changing location, changing pass type. We're respecting the role of individual constraints. Linus, the point guard here, he's playing against our really quick point guard, and then he's playing against our 6'10" big. Loads of additional ways we could change this task. We could have Linus coming off some type of different movement. Joe spoke about a stampede yesterday. We could add triggers into this. So there's so many different things we could do within a task such as this one. This is one of my favorite activities for shooting, and it's called jungle shooting. The offense will always be offense. The defense will always be defense. The offense can shoot, drive, and pass, but they cannot finish at the rim. Their goal is to score 6 brads within a minute. If they score 6 brads, they win. If the defense force 3 deflections or turnovers, they win. So there are 2 ways to win the game. So this is something I'm doing a lot now in our small-sided games, offering 2 opportunities to win. So as opposed to just getting to a certain score, maybe the defense wins if they get 2 stops out of a certain coverage or they force 3 turnovers, while the offense also has an opportunity to win with points or something else. So that's jungle shooting, and now you're just seeing the 2-on-1 shooting. How could constraints be manipulated within jungle shooting? I'm going to give you guys a minute to talk about that. What else could we do to change the environment within jungle? Go. And time. Let's come, Stefan and Martin, let's come to you guys first. What did you say? More players, great example. So we could even do jungle shooting 5 against 4 or 5 against 5, especially if you have some extra coaches or anyone who can move pretty well. Obviously, at the youth level, it's key that players play defense. It's different to the NBA. But in certain tasks, just so we can allow younger players to play more offense sometimes, which I think is really important, I might step in sometimes and be an extra defender, just so we can create those more repetitions. So exactly, great example. Kenny. Fantastic, I love that. So Kenny said, if you've created a shot in a particular way, you can't use that solution again. So for instance, maybe because of the shot selection there, we only allowed 3s. But maybe they did a slide 3 as a solution to stay behind the 3-point line if they're run off the line. Well, they can't do that again. Great example. What else have we got? Let's take one more. Let's go to ladies right here. Any ideas? Remove players. Fantastic. Make it simpler, especially for younger kids. Great example. Now, Alan spoke about scaling yesterday. For younger kids, it would be outside the paint, shooting outside the paint as opposed to 3s. And less defenders, more opportunities to pass. Something else I would do is maybe incentivize trapping and blitzing. So as opposed to 3 deflections, if the defense forces 2 turnovers off a trap, they win. I'm really big on that. We could say the offense can only shoot after a trigger. So that could be a get, dribble handoff, a pick and roll. So they got to run a trigger first before they shoot. Lots and lots of different opportunities within jungle. Something else I do is manipulate environmental constraints within jungle by playing loud music. So I might play arena sounds. I might play some classical music. I might play some opera. And I'm doing it to just stimulate, different feelings within the players. This is an example of the reality of what learning looks like. And this is actually quite an old video. This is 3 years old when I first moved to Italy. And at the time, this player was one of the better players in the under-16s national team. And this was an example of an individual workout. Now, I have changed since because I don't really use individual workouts anymore. And the reason why is just I can't create an affordance landscape within an individual that is that representative. But if a player has a very persistent rate limiter, and a rate limiter to something that is limiting them from expressing a functional solution, then that is where something like that could be useful. So especially in shooting, if I have a player who is really not functional as a shooter, an individual workout could be good if I have coaches to play defense. The minimum, though, is I would need me and another assistant to design something that's realistic. If I don't have that, I would not do an individual workout. And that's one of the hardest things, convincing players but playing in a small group where they can interact with other teammates and defenders, it's going to be more optimal for their learning. So with our player development this year, we had groups of anywhere from 3 to 5 to 6 players, and we'd constantly be changing the groups. So it was never guards and bigs separated. Basketball is, I call it complementary pairings. Everyone has to play with everyone. So as opposed to separating them, I put them all together.